Welcome to the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. I'm Don Glanden, Head of Graduate Jazz Studies. Each year we welcome distinguished artists, performers, and thinkers to our campus to interact with our students. November 29th, 2017 was a special day as we welcomed the great bassist John Patitucci. John talked about his years growing up, his development as a musician, and he listened and commented on our student performers. Please join me now as we welcome John Patitucci.
Since we're in Philadelphia, one of my favorite jazz towns, I'm going to play a piece by the great Benny Golson, who's not only one of the great composers, but one of the most beautiful people you'll ever meet. So this is called Whisper Not. song, but I've never played it like solo. So I just realized that's a hard tune to warm up on. That's a tune worth working on. I mean, I love that song. And for bass players, I encourage you to learn tunes in a holistic way, like Ray Brown used to make guys play and sing the song, which is great. This way is a great way to do it too, because it forces you to see if you can spell the song out for people without any help. Nobody's playing the chain. You kind of have to make it rhythmically. You have to sort of keep yourself together, and then melodically you have to keep yourself together, and you have to somehow communicate that song all by yourself. So that's one I think I'm going to keep playing. I'm always looking for different solo repertoire too. And thanks for allowing me to practice in front of you. I'm always trying to do that anyway. I think if you don't take chances, because I started with Wayne in 1986. We started playing. I met him through Chick. But we didn't start that band until 2000. And when those guys came, what happened, I can't explain it, but I know I'm thankful for every note of it, you know. But anyway, what I've learned from him is that if you're not reckless and don't take chances, you can't really get to the magic in music. You have to be willing to fail, which I do my share of failing. I did a little bit on that last song, but I think, you know, but if you risk it, also you can win a few rounds too, you know. This is Philly, you know. So. Anyway, I talk too much. So anyway, well, we're gonna sit down. I guess we're gonna talk some more.
So we'll do this for just a short period of time so that everybody can find out more about you, and then in terms of your journey, and then we have a group that's going to come up and play, and you can work with them a little bit. Yeah. So you're from Brooklyn, born in Brooklyn.
Yes.
Child of the 50s, late 50s.
Yeah, born in 59.
59. So
it was an important year in jazz. I didn't know it at the time.
That's true. And what's that major influential album from 1959?
Well, for me, Kind of Blue became a huge thing, but also Giant Steps. I'm a huge Coltrane fanatic, you know, so that was also recorded that year.
And early on, your major influences were in R&B and
totally
and rock, and you played only electric for the first few years, right?
And even before that, I had bongos and maracas, and I sang. And I wanted to play the guitar because my older brother, who's 3 years older than I am, who's an amazing guy, I've always looked up to him. We're very close. We're kind of like twins, 3 years apart. And he started playing guitar. So, of course, whatever he did, I was like, I want to do that too. Except his teacher was making him learn how to read music right away. And I was an ear guy. And so they put the guitar in my hand. And I'm lefty, but I play righty. And they put the pick in my hand. And it was like, wow, I can't do this. And then I was trying to read out of the Mel Bay book, you know, Little Brown Jug, you know, with four ledger lines below the staff in the G clef, and I was like, I hate this. I'm done. And then so I went back to, you know, not knowing what I was gonna. I really wanted to play the drums too. I think my dad said, forget about that. But anyway, my brother had the idea you should play bass because you could use your fingers, and there's no pick. So I was like, So we got a bass. It was hanging on somebody's, as an ornament on their wall. It was $10, and it was a Sears Telstar bass. It was horrendous, and I loved it. It was like it buzzed on every fret because, you know, I was hearing Jamerson on the radio playing on the two tunes that really I think sealed the deal for the bass for me were I Was Made to Love Her, Stevie Wonder, and also For Once in My Life, Stevie Wonder, because the bass was like right in your face on those records, those Motown records. It was amazing. And that was the beginning of my love affair with R&B and African-American culture. At large, it became something that found me and adopted me, and I thank God for it. And then my brother and I heard all the pop music that was on the radio in New York in the 60s. which also meant WPLJ, where we heard B.B. King and Hendrix, and then we also heard the British invasion. The Beatles came, and the Who, and all these people. But the R&B music was something that really stuck in many ways too, because of the bass and the way the music was, and the connection to jazz that I didn't even understand quite yet. And then my grandfather brought home these records because his father, I think, had a speakeasy during Prohibition in Brooklyn. So he no doubt heard stride piano players and all that, because he always liked U.B. Blake and all these people. He liked stride piano, and so I'm kind of going across the board. But that's kind of how jazz found me, and the records that he brought home. Mosaic, Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers with Wayne Shorter. Children of the Night was on that record. Wes Montgomery records with Ron Carter and Herbie Hancock and Grady Tate. Records like Oscar Peterson records with Ray Brown. All these records, I didn't know. Jimmy Smith, Hoochie Coochie Man. Ray Charles, Genius plus Soul equals Jazz. Monk, some Monk records. So, can you imagine these little kids putting on these records and going, what? It's like I couldn't understand it, but I felt something, and it stirred something in us. We didn't know what we were dealing with, but it was so powerful.
Right. Was your grandfather a musician? Or?
This was my mother's father. No, he was an interesting guy. He was a Renaissance guy. Didn't have anything past the sophomore year of high school education. He was kind of a rebel. He used to run. He was a truant, as it was the term back in the day. Mm-hmm. So this man, who had not much education, used to do the Times crossword puzzle every day. And he was the best chef in the family. He learned from one of the aunts who had come over from the old country in Italy. He was born in the United States, but he was very Italian and incredible chef. Taught me how to make ravioli and by hand. And he also had a great ear. And he also fought in World War II. He had a Purple Heart, fought with Patton. Around the holidays, he'd get real melancholy because he had come home from the World War II. And, in the late 50s, early 60s, there wasn't that long after that when you think about it. And you'd hear, like, when we moved to California later, and we finally had a piano because my brother went to school and was he was the pioneer. He got his degree in classical guitar. Somebody who'd played R&B and jazz and blues, all of a sudden went to college, and they said, well, you have to play classical guitar. You can't play that. And so he learned how to do that, So he was a trailblazer. Anyway, my grandfather was the one who got him his first guitars. He loved music. Around the holidays sometimes, in the midst of one of those Italian eat-a-thons where there's like 10 courses at Thanksgiving or Christmas, you'd hear some tinkling from the piano in the other room, and I would sneak in there, and as soon as he sensed me there, he would stop. But he was trying to play old tunes. He loved U.B. Blake, he loved Earl Father Hines. Earl Father Hines was also in that box of records. Okay. Errol Garner. So, to me, because of my faith, I see that as God saying, here you go, this is what you're going to do. Yeah. And I'm going to put all these people in your path to take you that way. And it's amazing because I shouldn't be here right now. I was just a kid from East Flatbush. My parents didn't know anything about the music business. Even when my teacher started saying, this he's got some gifts, they were like, oh, whatever, They were nice about it. They didn't try to discourage me, but they had no idea. Yeah. And so they would come to my concerts, oh, that's nice and everything, but whatever, And I had this mentor in California, this guy who had wound up playing with Wes Montgomery and all these people. He started telling them, and then years later, when the music thing kind of worked for me, I asked my dad, what did you think I was going to do? He said, well, I thought you were going to be a salesman. I guess I am, in a way, but...
It seems like everybody has that moment. They heard something, or somebody, a relative or somebody was in their life and they heard, I heard so-and-so play and I knew what I wanted to do from that minute. But that box of records really changed your life.
It was insane. And he just told me that Jimmy Merritt lives near here. When I heard that tune on the Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers record with Wayne called Children of the Night, the first thing you hear is Jimmy Merritt. Boom, boom, like it's like big bass sound, you know. And I didn't understand anything about it, but I felt it. I felt it.
And so then you did go to college for music, and you went to San Francisco State.
My first year, because the mentor, the guy who found me as a 13-year-old kid and made me learn how to read music because I was playing completely by ear. And at that point, only on electric because I was really short and I couldn't even hold one of those yet. And he said, he kind of was really smart. He said, okay, this is what you're going to do. You're going to, I'm going to teach you. You're going to learn how to read music. He showed me a lot about harmony and started. My brother did too. Whatever my brother got from a guitar teacher, he would show me everything. So this guy, Chris Paler, it's really spelled Polar, like the actress Amy Poehler. He's related to her, I guess, but he's much older. He had played with all these people in the Bay Area. He was a great bass player, played both, had a big band, arranged right. Brilliant guy. Even subbed on Bill Evans' trio one night. He said it scared the heck out of him. He said he wasn't ready. And all those that harmony was just blowing by him. And he was like, He was subbing for Eddie Gomez.
Oh, boy, yeah.
But he played with Wes a lot. And he was totally into Ray Brown, too, and Ron. So Ray Brown and Ron were my two primary guys at first. So he made me learn how to read music. He taught me a lot of stuff. And he said, this is what you're going to do. When you get out of high school, you're going to go study with Charles Ciani, who was the principal bass of the San Francisco Opera and the associate principal of the symphony, and you're going to learn how to play the big bass for real. And I was like, really? Okay. And I went in, I'll never forget this. So he had sort of taught me how to hold a bow. And, I grew up hearing opera in the house, too. My father used to blast Mario Alonso records and sing at the top of his lungs, It's hilarious. But it was great. I heard some great music. So he showed me the bow grip, Chris did. But then it was like I was playing in the orchestra at high school and kind of just winging it. So now I didn't even have my own bass. There was a rich kid who went to the school and he let me borrow his bass because we didn't have that kind of dough.
Yeah.
So I borrowed a bass and I went and auditioned for San Francisco State. So I had no idea. Otherwise, I think I would have folded into a lump of nothing on the floor and cried. But I went in there, and there's Ciani, and Ciani was an imposing figure. He was a big, tall man, had hands like super strong. He was sitting there at a table, and next to him was Laszlo Varga, who was a famous cellist who was principal with the New York Philharmonic before that. He was the orchestra conductor at San Francisco State for some reason. So those two guys are looking at me like staring me down. And I'm sitting there. I got my little Vivaldi sonata that I learned. And it's a cello, one of those cello sonatas that you learn. And I just winged it. I went up there and I played, and I was scared to death. And so, there's that pregnant pause when you're done. And I was like, oh, no. Because they looked, they were not friendly faces. And I was, it was so awkward, auditions, So I said, I was trying to make small, I said, I studied with one of your students, Maestro, Chris Paler, and he looked at me and he went, he's taught you well. And that was it. I was in. But I didn't even know it. I was on probation. They were watching me. Because,
Wow.
I came in, I played my little sonata, and it was obvious that he saw something there. But it was obvious, like, I later learned that I was in a crowd of bass players. Some of them were already, this was the explosion of the bass after Gary Carr, the first North American virtuoso of the double bass in America, So there were guys, upperclassmen. I went into the first Friday afternoon bass class with Maestro. I walk in there, and there's a guy who gets up and he plays Bach suites at pitch. This is 1978. And he's killing it. I know this guy still, his name's Ken Miller. But, nailing it. And he had a nice Italian bass. And I was like, oh, is this the way they play in college? No. So I had a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah.
So, but I'm glad I didn't know about Varga. I already knew that I should fear the maestro. I knew he was like one of those guys because he was famous for just he didn't play. Like if you didn't come in totally prepared, it was that kind of Toscanini style. I don't advocate it, but boy, it was powerful, and I definitely practiced my tail off for a solid year. And
Well, that's always encouraging. John Patitucci accepted on probation.
Yeah, because, here's the irony of it. So I get in, and the same guy who played the Bach suites auditioned for the jazz band, and that was my thing. So I went in there and I played, and they said, okay, well, we have to have the kid, and you can share the chair with him. He didn't want to do it. But then we got in the orchestra, and I was sitting down at the end of the section, and going, and so I had to work hard to learn. And yes, I was. And at the end of the first semester, he was pleased. He yelled at me for a solid year. And then at the end, I said, Maestro, we're moving to Southern California. He said, don't go. He wanted me to go to the conservatory and everything, but my dad had got a new job, and I was young. I wasn't ready to move out yet. And so we off to L.A. we went.
I'm curious at both ends of the educational system, because I think that period in the 70s was a transitional time for jazz education.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of things were being codified,
I met David Baker and studied with him during that period.
David Baker, and what was going on at Berkeley, what was going on at North Texas, and now, all these years later, the vast number of programs, jazz programs in universities. I'm just curious, because you kind of have experienced it at both ends. You taught for 10 years in New York
City College in Harlem, and now
at Berkeley.
Berkeley for another.
Yes, I'm just curious about some of your ideas about jazz education and some of the materials that are used. And, I think it was much more common then to be a classical major, or at least
you had to.
You had to.
Unless like my parents couldn't afford to send me to Berkeley or one of those places that was jazz, like, specific. So I ran into one of my old buddies on tour this year, and he was a bass player too, and we talked about, we had gone to Long Beach State together for 2 years and studied, and the tuition, we were joking about what the tuition was. 1978 through 80, my parents, thank God, these schools were available, great teachers. The tuition for a year was under $250 for me. So they weren't thinking about, oh yeah, we'll send them out to Berkeley. It was like, forget about Berkeley. Berkeley what? We're at Berkeley. No way they're going to send me across country. There was no way. And my brother also went to a state college. Luckily, in the state colleges in California at that time, there were some very fine teachers that were teaching on the various instruments. But for me, what was really significant, what happened even before that, in high school, we had a visit. I went to some clinics and different things, and I somehow, towards the end of my high school career, I found out about Jamie Ebersol camps or whatever, and I went, and they gave me a scholarship. Again, we didn't have the bread to, so I got a scholarship, and I studied ear training with David Baker. Now, this was an amazing epiphany for me, because I thought, for me, my ear was always my thing. Okay, I can hear. I got that at least. I wasn't a great sight reader yet. And I walk in the room, and it's ear training with David Baker, and he sits down, and he goes, blam, and plays a voicing, and goes, sing! And the kids are blasting, because they had him before. So all of a sudden, they're singing the scale through the sound. They got it, and I'm like, oh no, I thought I had a good ear. I guess I'm really screwed, because I know my eyes aren't that great, and now my ears are in question. So I just, again, I think my life has always been being humbled by realizing that music was a marathon and not a sprint, and it was a life, I wasn't going to learn everything I needed to know. And I think I was pretty naive when I was a kid too. I thought, I want to be the best bass player in the world, until I realized that doesn't exist, man. There's a lot of people that play great, and everybody has a thing to bring, and there's not one. Hopefully you can be one of many. It's a brotherhood and a sisterhood of many bass players of all ilks, But, at least it made me aim high. But it was interesting, because I encountered David, and he was beautiful. And then I wound up, and this is another thing, interesting enough, I auditioned for this all-state jazz ensemble, the IAJE, whatever, CMEA, Hula Dula. Right. And so I auditioned, and I got it. But I found out years later that I wasn't the first choice. They picked somebody else, and he couldn't make it. So so I get in there, and David Baker's there, and he was really kind to me, and he goes, man, you remind me of Mingus, I was like, wow, really? And he encouraged me. And he did a lot of ear training with us, and we did all this stuff. And he was one of the godfathers of jazz education in America. A sweet man, and I can't tell you the impact he had on me. Because he was kind, and he showed me something very important, that the ear was, number one, primary. Two things I've learned from coming up the way I came up, and also from teaching. You can't underestimate the power of rhythm. That's the number one thing. Because you can have even a great sound, and if your rhythm is not happening, nobody wants to hear what you got. The rhythm is what carried every major innovation in harmony also. Not only in jazz music and classical music, all music, folk music, ethnic musics. The rhythm carries all the ideas and all the messages. And people who don't know anything about music feel the rhythm and they respond. They don't respond to, wow, that was a flat 9 chord with a plus 11. Did you check that out? They're like, what? They do respond if it feels great. And the power of the rhythm is what transmits that harmony and those great melodies and every innovation in music. So being around Danilo all these years too, we make that, this is a different thing that happened now. I think it's more a wave that's more important now. The old European conservatory training when it comes to rhythm, and I mean, I have one of my best friends plays in the Emerson String Quartet, and he'll tell you this. He went to a lot of big schools. He said they don't really teach rhythm enough. Rhythm is not primary. It has to be. I don't care what music you play. You play in a string quartet, you play in an orchestra. You play in jazz music, forget it. If you don't have rhythm, you might as well sell insurance. So you got to work on rhythm because it's how you communicate with the people next to you in the bandstand and the people out in the audience. So that's the thing also, that African culture, as it was brought to every country, changed music history forever. Huge, huge, hugely important for all of us, everybody in this room and everybody outside of this room. I can't stress it enough. And so with Danilo and the Global Institute for Jazz, we really, 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 really work on that. Because the thing is, even in the way I was trained in the classical thing too, sometimes teachers would sort of treat rhythm as a separate thing that you practice separately. Rhythm should be involved in everything you practice. Because rhythm is how you speak, it's how you walk, it's how you move. It's everything. If I stand up there and I don't communicate you the rhythm of Whisper Not, you're going to be going, what the heck is he doing and why? But if I can give you that rhythm and make you feel the song and the flow of the rhythm, then you hear the harmony better and you hear the melody better. For me, that's one of the reasons why I like to practice that exercise. Can I communicate a song to people by myself? Can I make them feel it, and does it make sense? Anyway, I'm really talking way too much.
That reminds me of, I've heard stories that all of Dizzy's workshops that he did from the conga drum.
And Danilo spent a lot of time with Dizzy. Yeah. I did a record date once with Dizzy, and I was fairly young. And I was just in awe of him walking in the room. Mm-hmm. He had one of those beautiful staffs. Yeah. It's like Moses or something that came through. And it was just like, there he is. I mean, I wrote papers on him in high school. And I read books about him, and there he was. And we played on a record date. We played Joy Spring, a Clifford Brown song. And there was Dizzy playing. He blew on that thing. And it was just like, whoa, yeah. Really? I couldn't believe it. I thought I died and went to heaven.
We were talking a little bit before we got started about how the topic of spirituality comes up with artists and musicians frequently.
Yeah.
And I know that you have a trio now with Danilo and
it's
Brian
a co-op.
Blade.
Yeah, it's our
Children of Light.
Children of the Light.
And
yeah.
you've spoken, extensively about your worldview and about your Christian faith. And I'm just wondering the relationship between somebody's worldview and an overall life philosophy, and how that affects the direction of the music, and how that, what effect that has when you interact with other musicians. And we were talking about the Coltrane documentary, and how that's focused on, his spiritual life and how it was reflected in his music. I just wanted to get some of your thoughts on that.
Person. Well, I think now it's even more important than ever, because there's a lot of people who say they believe something, but their actions tell a different tale. We have it in politics right now. It's insane what's going on. We have people who espouse certain things, but if you don't live them and take care of the people without a voice and the poor, and if you're not actively involved in lifting people up, then it's just a philosophy that doesn't really have any oomph behind it. So for me, it's actually a humbling and it's a very daunting thing. If people know what I believe and they ask me about it, I have to walk in it and talk in it. And believe me, being a husband and a father has taught me a lot about that. And it's humbling, because if you say, in my case, if you call on the name of Jesus and say, look, I'm a Christian, then that you're wearing like a big mantle. Now, you can't do it all yourself, but I wish, and the other thing is it's important to have dialogue. People of all faiths should be able to really sit down and be together. There's a lot of people who are political on, the extremes, who are always fighting about things. But I wish people would be more concerned about taking care of the poor, the homeless, feeding people, taking care of the mentally ill people, helping kids, and human trafficking, make sure that women don't have to worry about being abused. There's so many things that we could talk about. But if I talk about it, I have to walk it. And that kind of responsibility is something that we see a lot of leaders now in the world who have no ethical responsibility. They talk about all kind of stuff, but they act. So it's serious business when you open your mouth in this way, and I don't take it lightly. Also, I'm a father of 2 daughters, and I spent my life trying to be an example of what a man should be. And I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying that I'm, the poster child for that, but I'm trying to be that person every day. And there's so much at stake, we could talk for hours about it, but it does influence the way you play music together. With Danilo and Brian, we have a lot of love for each other, and we share a lot of faith together. And we share the idea of wanting to give to all of you who come see us and everything, something tangible. So, and Wayne, that band, that quartet is really an amazing situation, because Wayne's a Buddhist. He has a different philosophy. He's like a second father to me. I love that man. I can't tell you how much, really. It's huge. So I think your faith, whatever faith you espouse, it has to have legs and traction. So that's the way I feel about it. It's not so easy. And again, as a husband and father, you have people in your very own house who can hold the mirror up to you and show you when you're not walking the walk, and say, yeah, I thought you said this. And especially with kids, with my daughters who are now 20 and now the other one's almost 17, they've taught me a lot about spiritual growth, because they can just look up at you when they're, and go, yeah, but Dad, So that's a very short synopsis of a very long journey that really kind of started officially when I was 17. I'm going to be 58. I've been studying theology, and I was an elder in my church. I was a deacon and elder. I've been involved in that kind of work, and my end of it was really that work, the missional work. I felt like that was huge.
Yeah, something that has always interested me is looking at somebody that does something on an extraordinarily high level, and saying, how did that happen? You know, what did that person do to develop that set of skills, and that level of honesty in their playing? What do they believe about art and music and life? And so I really appreciate you sharing all of those things, your musical journey and your deepest thoughts about things. I think that we got to know you a lot better. So I appreciate
thank you.
that.
Thank you very much.
So before we bring these guys up, Steve, you were going to check for some questions. Should I just kind of open it up and take 2 or 3? Does anybody have something they'd really love to ask? Yeah.
You said that you were mostly an electric player, and that when you got to college, you kind of did more upright stuff. And I'm wondering, you said that there's a lot of stuff you had to catch up on too. And I was wondering, how you really went about doing that. And I'm wondering if you ever had moments when you felt super behind, and just kind of how you handled it.
Yeah, I mean, he was talking about because I started on electric, I was 10. Actually, in high school is when I was about 15 when I started on this, so the middle of high school. And I was hearing all those records too, and hearing Ray Brown, all these guys play, and physically, that was one of the biggest things, going from, adding this to the electric, because the electric, by comparison, is not so physically daunting. It is at first when you start any instrument. There's coordination issues and sort of independence things that have to happen, and you have to build up calluses. No matter what you play, a string instrument is going to involve some adjustment. Your body changes. Your fingers are sculpted for the instrument. When you start playing that thing, wow! I mean, all of a sudden, you get you have to deal with the physicality of it, and also there's no more frets. So it was like, wow! Every note, I have to really be thinking about centering it. Not just in the rhythm, but the pitch too. So, there was a lot of times, and at first it was very frustrating because I could get around the little guy, and then I picked this thing up and I couldn't do even the same things that I could do in my young state on the bass. I mean, I was developing, trying to get it together. And then picking this up and going, wow, this is really... And then the right hand, learning how to pull a sound out of the instrument, which is something that I work on and I'm still working on, and I've really done a lot of thinking about. Also from studying classical playing too, the way your arm works and the way you distribute weight and pull the sound out and all those things. So, but here's an interesting thing, because my brother was always trailblazing. When he started taking guitar lessons, the teacher started shaping his left hand. He would come home, because at first I was like, thumb was hanging over the fretboard, like I was like just like gorilla-ing it, just and he said, no, it ain't happening. You got to like got my thumb behind the thing, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, this feels awful. He said, no, it's going to be better. And then from an early age, I mean, he was studying with, then he studied with somebody who studied with Segovia, the famous classical guitarist. So all of a sudden, my hand position was being shaped by these scale studies and all this crazy stuff that I was completely ignorant to. But my older brother told me to do it, and I loved him so much, and I looked up to him. Whatever he said, I did. So I learned the fretboard pretty quick, and I learned my chord forms, and I learned my scales, and I learned coordination, crossing strings, all kind of without even realizing what I was learning. I was just, driven to learn it. So some of that carried over, but then luckily I had soon, when I went to college, I had a fantastic teacher who played the bass amazingly well, who coincidentally went to Curtis. His father played in the Philadelphia Orchestra. I think he played in the Philadelphia Orchestra a little bit. There's a school of bass playing with the bow, the French bow, the Italian school, the French bow, that is totally Philly, by the way. So the way I play, that's why when I moved back to New York and I played with a lot of guys, in the studios, and I played chamber music and stuff, a lot of the bass players, the ones that I gravitated towards, who we got along the best, and who are some of the guys in the Metropolitan Opera, they all studied here at Curtis. So without knowing it, I was being raised, then when I got to the double bass, I was being raised in a very good school traditionally about how you deal with the bass, how you pull a sound out of the bass. I kind of call it, it's kind of like it's an elegant power, I would say, the way they played. The arm weight, because the Italian guy that I had at first would yell at us if we pressed the bow. It's like, don't press the bow. I'd be, okay. You know, but I mean, that's still in my ear, so I never press the bow because I know that it's not going to help me, you know. But so anyway, yes, I had people around me in my life at every turn. It seemed like there was somebody placed there to sort of guide me and push me towards getting better. And I still have those people in my life. I still study the instrument all the time. I'm always like, right now I'm shedding. I have a Schubert's Trout Quintet performance coming up in less than a week. We rehearsed yesterday for the first rehearsal. We got another one tomorrow. And then bam, we're in it. Luckily, I've played the piece before, so a number of times with some great people. But every time I played with them, it was like a masterclass in how to interpret Schubert a little better each time. So I'm a student, a perpetual student, a lifelong student of music and the instrument. So don't feel bad if you feel like you got to catch up, because it's sort of like this giant continuum. And I'm older, I may be over here and you're starting, but we're on the same line, and I was where you were before. And there's no reason why you can't come over here where I am now. It just takes a lot of work. If you're willing to work, you can get better. And that's where the sweat equity comes in. There's talent. Everybody gets talent. I believe it comes from God. People believe all kinds of things. Once you have that talent, that's only a beginning. I've seen a lot of people squander their talent because they had no work ethic. So you need the talent, and then you need to work it. How bad do you want it? Only you know that in your heart. But I can tell, how old are you now?
18.
Perfect. So now for the next 10 years, you lock yourself in the practice room, and that's what you do. Thank you. Because literally, I'm serious when I say I shouldn't be here right now. I had nothing, that the world looks at and says, well, yeah, he's all grooved in, he's got connections. I had none of that. He had another idea, but, I got to say, I shouldn't, from the way people look at things and how they think things should happen, I shouldn't be here. But here I am. So that's why I want to encourage everybody to follow. If you got the dream and you're willing to work hard enough, you kind of need to you need to go for it when you're young, instead of being 65 and go, what would have happened if I tried? Too late then.
Yeah. Let's bring up our group. And I'm looking for Alex. Alex, where's Alex?
Alex is there.
Oh, Alex. Come on up, Alex.
He's got his bad scarf on. He's ready to go.
Yeah, so we...
Another question while they get set? Yeah.
You had to pick one desert island record.
Don't make me do that. Yeah, you have to give me a genre too, because I have them in every genre.
How about one jazz and one whatever else?
Oh, man. The jazz one's really hard because there's so many. I can't really pick one. I have to tell you a few. Obviously, that first record that killed me was Mosaic Art Lady, but there's also Kind of Blue and Giant Steps and Crescent by Coltrane, Love Supreme by Coltrane. Wes Montgomery, Tequila Down Here on the Ground. I could give you a bunch of them. So Much Guitar, the one with Wynton Kelly, all that. So Ray Brown on those Oscar Peterson records. The first one I heard live in Chicago, the one with Chicago and no, it's just trio with Ed Thigpen. Bach, solo, suites, Casals, Boxel, Sweets, Rostropovich. All the Bartok string quartets. The one Ravel string quartet is maybe one of my favorite pieces of music. Schubert Quintet C Major, two cello, chamber group. One of the greatest pieces written of any music of any kind. I mean, I have tons of them.
I'm curious about Now He Sings, Now He
Now he
Sobs.
sings, now he sobs.
Oh,
Yeah. Of course.
Because you had to go reinvent that, the
Well,
trio
here's the
concept.
weird, here's the weird thing. Okay, Chick Corea, right? All of a sudden that happened in my life. And then I'm thinking, okay, I grew up listening to Stanley. That was one of the first, he was the first sort of bass god, you know, in the United States. Like for people of my age, he came and he just like, he destroyed the whole thing. Like he's from Philly, of course. And he played both instruments. And that was the first time I saw somebody play them on such a high level. I went, wow, you can do both. See, take note of that. Because before that, I didn't know really that could be done that way. So, yeah. Also, his early, you know, the way he played. Well, Miroslav and Roy Haynes, which later on Danilo and I spent some time on the road with Roy Haynes, kind of our finishing school, you could say. All those records. I mean, there's millions of records. R&B, Shot Heard Around the World record, Donny Hathaway Live, Billy Week. That record, I heard that record when I was 13. I learned the entire solo, and it changed my life. Chuck Rainey on a million records, Aretha Franklin, Amazing Grace record with the choir, James Cleveland, unbelievable. All the Philly records, Anthony Jackson. I mean, there's so much Jocko's records. There's, like, I can't give you one.
I'll take those.
Yeah, those are good ones though. Anyway, we got a whole band here. All right. Tell me your names.
I'm Nathaniel.
Nathaniel, nice to meet you. Alex, I know.
Colin.
Colin, that's easy.
Zion.
Zion, yep. Oh, nice name. Okay. All right.
Alice, what do you play? What do you mind to play?
I don't know what it is. I thought it was
Yeah.
We're actually gonna play Sanders.
I'm gonna grab a chair. Chairs are waiting. I thought it was gonna be lighter, you know?
was a whole.
Yeah, it's like set up tighter.
Yeah.
And be like together. The other thing too is, I would be interested to see, Alex, in this situation, in a room like this, a good exercise. I'm somebody who sometimes plays acoustic like I did today, or sometimes I use an amp, or I use microphones mostly, even when I use an amp. But it's a good exercise for all of you, sometimes if you play either with the amp down quite a bit softer, or no amp, sometimes with an amp, and see what that does. Tell me your name again? Colin. What that does for Colin, because Colin's gonna have to learn how to create the energy without the volume. So the other thing is, also sometimes when people have to lean in a little bit in these situations, I would move Nathaniel. I would move the piano like much closer, so you're tight and you're looking at each other, and there's more dialogue. Because what happens, I know you're in the fishbowl now. Everybody's like, but the best thing you can do, even in those situations, is the unity that you feel when you look across at your brother or sister who's with you. This I've seen it work in my life so many times where I got to a gig and I was destroyed. We 3 flights plus whatever it takes to get there, and you're destroyed. You're like, man, I don't feel like I got anything to give. Then I look across and Brian goes, whoa, and then you're there, or Danilo plays some incredible thing. And so, Wayne, or whoever is there. But just the idea that the group and the unity that you guys have is what is going to translate to them. So, and also remembering that it's not me alone responsible for making it happen. It's all together. So I would like to hear a little bit more dialogue. Like, first of all, with you, Nathaniel, when you play your solos, I would challenge you to because you play so well, to now try to do some different things with your left hand. That's the one thing when I talk to older pianists, and I've played with a lot of great ones, that's the one thing they talk about all the time, is the independence of the left hand, the ability for the left hand to set things up. I think you're already traveling towards that, but I think you could do some more. So some people will say, like Danilo will say, get into the stride guys, get into McCoy, get into different versions of that. Monk, very interesting left hand stuff. Use the history of the music to propel you to find something, to put it together that comes through the lens of Nathaniel. Okay, so it's like a connection, but also to propel you into another thing. So I would check those guys out. Like I'm always shocked. Sometimes we do team teaching, and so Danilo and I will be teaching, and there's a pianist in front of us, and he starts showing him all this stuff, and I'm like trying to scribble it out because he's showing him these amazing things, and he's got a vast knowledge of all piano history. Like, so somebody will come and go, well, yeah, I really like Willie the Lion Smith. He goes, oh, really? He's like, and he shows them some stride stuff. Or then one guy came in one day and said, oh man, Bill Evans is my man. And he just showed him. So I think the more you can have a broad, I can't tell because I just heard you once. I can tell that you've listened and absorbed some good stuff already. I can hear some swinging like when Kelly is in there with different things, and I love that. So keep doing that. But also, for you and Zion, it's going to be important to try to have a dialogue. I like the fact that you laid out for a while and then you comped a little bit. I would say if you could tuck your sound under when he's playing, plus the lid was down.
Yeah.
So try to, because I like your sound a lot. But get used to being able to tuck that sound under the piano so that when you comp and do a little something, it's kind of this nice texture that feeds the piano solo.
We're still working that out.
Yeah, no, that's
For
something
8
that.
years, and it's still like, every time we play together, it's a new learning experience with that.
But it's great that you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because I've taught for a lot of years, and a lot of times I go crazy in bands because I have had so many ensembles with guitar and piano. And I said, well, there's so many choices you have. And a lot of times, nobody chooses the layout one. And I'm like, guys, hello, how about laying out and letting the other person create a texture and then join them in the texture. You don't have to be like bouncing off, hitting each other. So there's so many beautiful things that can happen with the textures, you know, and it doesn't have to be, like sometimes you'll have a band where the pianist will assume, wow, I'm the count, tacitly assume that they're going to play and you're going to adjust on the guitar. Well, that's not right. Or on the other side, you have a guitar player who comes in there playing all the time, and they're not really listening, so the voicings are clashing, and everything's completely nuts. But you don't have that. You have already something that's working. So I think you can even build on that. And this is my other thing that I would suggest: play duo.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Play a lot.
Isn't that fun? I can tell. I mean, I can tell something's going on, and there is a synergy there. But I think you can really develop that. In other words. So the other thing is, I think for Alex, when you're playing, I think you need a little wider triplet beat inside your playing. So what I did, and Daniil helped me with this too, is I always wanted to play the drums anyway. So he showed me some 6/8 exercises that are great. On the drums, but also clapping and walking. So we're going to all do one right now. Everybody. All right, ready? Here we go. We're going to do one all together. Everybody, come on. Yeah, everybody. Come on. So here we go, right? This one you're going to have to, it's a 6/8 exercises, so your left foot and your right foot are going to be doing dotted quarters, right? So let's do it really slow, right? So we're going to go, right? So it's like dance. Music is like dance anyway. So I'm going to teach you a rhythm that's called the abacua. Anybody heard of that yet?
Yeah.
Okay, abacua, 6/8, special rhythm. It's sort of the essence of it. It contains the 6/8 clave in it, but it's really kind of, that 6/8 clave is where you get the ding ding ga ding later on in jazz. So we're going to go. Lay back. Everybody okay with that? Okay, now it's different. 1, 3. Keep clapping. So. So now we're going on the watch me now. We're going to do it slow for you. So now we're going to do. I sometimes add the last 8th note in the abacua. So I'll go. So now I'm going to step on the middle beat of each 3 grouping, right? So. Okay, now, when he showed me this the first time, I felt like the most uncoordinated person on planet Earth. So, and he had me do this, and this is a good way to do it. You walk forward when you're on the beat, and you walk backwards when you do the other. So check it out, you go. Now, this teaches you, you say, why in the world are you doing this, right? I'm teaching you that in swing, all the 8th note stuff that people talk about, you know, which for years in jazz education was completely mistaught, it does come from the triplet, but the triplets are not the same all the time. But we do at least have to be able to feel the triplet. It's not people say, well, no, it's like a dot, they used to say, it's like a dotted 8th and 16th. No. If you listen to a bird solo, in the course of 4 bars, you're going to hear all kinds of 8th notes. They're not equal. None of them are the same. It's a phrase. How can you say, how can you say that that's one kind of 16th or 8th note? You know? No, it's not. It's a feeling. But when we hear African music and we hear the bata drum, they're playing a lot of times, the rhythms are off the second note of the it's number 2 and it's number 5. Number 2 and 5 at the 6 notes in 6/8. So when you can have a thing like this where the bata is going boop beep, boop beep, boop beep, boop beep, boop beep, boop beep, boop beep. And so that kind of thing where you're playing off of the downbeat of each section of the 6/8, right? So you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 5, 2, 5, 2, 5. That makes you feel the triplet. Because if you got the middle of the triplet good, when you play, let me see your bass. So if you have to play, why do you do that? Because then when you go, the triplet we learned from 6/8 because the jazz was created from African 6/8 music. That when you hear, here I'll show you on the drums. When you hear somebody go, when somebody goes like this on the drums, it's not very far to go from that thing that we all love when we hear Elvin play and we want to all play like that. That's what drives me crazy. I wish I could play like that. I can't, but I do practice the drums for independence. And it helps. And everybody should play the drums for independence. I don't care if you play piano, your voice is your instrument, you play the guitar, you play the bass. So the bass is a big thing. I want you to be able to have a little bit more. So let's play for a second. I'll show you the difference. Now we're playing that blues with me for a second. Right here. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. drum solos. Like listen to records and when the drums do the trades, learn that vocabulary. And I've been doing that all my life. And then it's funny, when I got to meet some older musicians that I played with, Jack DeJohnette loves to do that. We would sit there in a band like and be trading for like hours. Yeah, and he sings too, and he can sing lines too. We would like scat sing, and he would be singing like crazy. But the idea of that rhythmic vocabulary, that's what makes that thing real to us.
Yeah.
For Colin, he has to know that vocabulary. He's got to play it. But all of us should know some of that vocabulary. It's really good and it's fun too.
Well, thank you for spending some extra time.
Oh, that was fun.
That's fun.